What's up, Colleen? Burns.
He has no clue, Joe.
No,
What's up, Joe? How are you, bud?
not much. How you doing?
Good.
What's up, Colleen?
He still has no clue.
Let me guess.
Burns.
One in his mouth. Didn't see that one coming.
What are you under your mom? You under your mom's Zoom?
See, you won't even know my mother's name if she told you. On my girlfriend's laptop. You of all people should know it's smart to find a woman better than you.
No. No, I figured you still live at home, so it could be your mom.
Saving money on rent, baby.
That's a good move out of you.
See? No.
Sean, have they told you anything about when you guys might start?
Shoot, I don't know. I don't know if there'll be any minor league season, to be honest. And the major league, there will be a major league season. We just don't know when.
Yeah.
My guess, like all the rumors you're seeing, is July 1st. And I'd say that might be pretty accurate. Probably be like a 3-week spring training, 2 or 3 week spring training, and then expanded rosters up in at our home ballpark, everyone's ballpark, and then some type of like taxi squad, just a bunch of minor leaguers at the complex in Arizona, just staying ready just in case they're needed type thing.
Right.
So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, so
It's all speculation right now.
yeah. What are you gonna be doing at that point?
Shoot, I don't know. Maybe I'll be home hanging out. Maybe helping with game planning with the big league squad from home, or potentially be in Arizona, kind of with the minor leaguers that are there.
Right.
Maybe they do 40 minor leaguers. There are 40-man roster with the big league team, and then 60 minor leaguers, something like that.
Right.
We'll see.
Because they're gonna need guys if guys get hurt.
Yep, guys go down, or maybe guys underperforming. Yeah, they're gonna need guys ready.
Yeah. It's definitely gonna be crazy. There's Sal.
Yeah, it's gonna be nuts. Sal, what's going on, man?
Where is he connecting his audio?
Yeah.
He doesn't have audio. It's his first time, I think, using a Zoom call, he said.
Sal, you hear us?
Yo, I'm here.
All right. It's like learning how to drive.
Yeah, I just saw Ty. Me and Ty got on at the same time. So
Where's he at?
Well, Sean, I definitely wanted to thank you for taking some time out and talking to us today. Strictly about pitching. We'll go strictly pitching today.
Yeah.
Sure. For guys that are on, I know Sean from way back. I think the first time I met you was back in the Wallenpaw Pack gym.
Yep.
Coaching for Iona.
7 years ago, maybe now.
Yeah. Yeah. Sean's kind of come through the ranks. So you went from Iona to PBR New Jersey, UMass Lowell.
Yep. So I spent 3 years at Iona. And I spent 6 months kind of jump starting prep baseball reporting in New Jersey. Then I went to UMass Lowell for 2 years, Elon for 2 years down here in North Carolina. And now first year in quarantine with the Mariners. So
Great start, right?
yeah, fucking real awesome. It's been great.
So, I mean, really, I mean, I'll leave it open to you. I mean, what is it that, what's your philosophy? What is it that you kind of look for? I know some of the questions that we've had from some guys are, about long toss, how many times a week, what they should be doing in between, good stuff for strengthening the arms, so some stuff along those lines.
Sure. Obviously, a little bit of a blanket question, but
Yeah.
as I talk, if you guys have anything more specific, just stop me and we could talk about it, right? But my ideas about pitching have evolved, obviously, since Iona and over 8 years of coaching. And some things never change, right? And I've always been a huge believer of throwing, right? Like throwing as much as you can. And at first that meant like a lot of long toss, a lot of, listening to your arm, but let's get expanded and throw long distances. Let's pull down every time we feel good. That type of thing. And I've since progressed, right? Like the one idea, and I started this at Elon. We're pitchers, right? We spend all this time throwing on flat surfaces, and yet we're expected to make our money, get our outs on a slope, right? So at Elon, the last 2 years I was there, we started throwing off the slope a lot more. And what that meant was we had to steal reps from somewhere else, right? So typically what that meant was like if it was a guy's long toss day, let's say, he would long toss and maybe instead of 3 pull downs at 150, 120, 190, he might just do 3 pull downs at 150 and then kind of work his way in light and hop on the mound for 8 to 12 pitches. Because that is where we need to do our work. That's where we need to influence changes in our delivery to kind of support what's coming out of our hand. And that was where we were going to get that job done, probably quickest and best. And the other thing I think is really important at the amateur level that it's apparent guys like Sal have done it, right? But weightlifting, right? Like training. I think a lot of guys miss that boat and then spend their freshman year kind of picking up ground, trying to get even with all the guys that have been at college program a couple of years. Where if all they had to do was, after heavy lift or after heavy throw days, whether that be long toss or a bullpen session or maybe a game, just every heavy day go and lift, right? Like it's not that complicated, right? If you have a heavy throw day, you're going to do a heavy lift or some type of lift, right? And try to pair up those days to make sure you have enough time for recovery. That to me is really important. And like, I always found the guys that I recruited, who I wound up giving money to, and the guys who I recruited got to campus and then, wound up being really good their freshman year, already had some type of strength base to them throughout their high school years. And that's not to say, you should be maxing out deadlift, twice a week, that type of thing, right? Like everyone likes putting that stuff on Twitter. I deadlifted 405 or, and you see their backs crunched over and, just looking at it makes me hurt, right? But just understand that like we need days to go and create adaptation and create strength, and then we need days to recover. So if you were going on like a standard 7-day work week, right, Monday through Sunday, let's say we had 3 heavy throw days, right? Like maybe it's a Tuesday, a Thursday, and Sunday. And Tuesday was a long toss, Thursday was a bullpen, Sunday was game action or a bullpen. you know, you could lift on those days, right? And then you'd have Monday to recover. You'd have a day to recover on Wednesday and 2 days to recover Friday and Saturday, right? That creating routine to me is more important than what the routine actually is, right? Like being able to buy into a process and be able to buy into some type of system that you believe in is way more important than the actual substance, to me, especially for young guys.
Yeah, makes sense for sure. Mike, Sal, you guys got any questions?
I guess what kind are you guys doing for, you know, warm-ups? You know, how do you feel about, you know, body blades? How do you feel about wrist weights? How do you feel about, you know, plyo care balls? What do you guys kind of maybe take a walk through that, you know, kind of before they start their throwing, you know, that early, you know, I guess that mindset work or whatever you guys are trying to do to get them ready to throw? What are you guys, you know, encouraging?
Yeah, so like at the pro level, right, what we do with the Mariners is actually it's wonderful, right? It's like the best system I've ever seen, apart from like having to run from the turf to the field and like do all that crap, right? But so if Sal were going through a day in spring training, typically what he would do is he'd have like 30 minutes of personal prep. And personal prep could mean, like, for some guys that was getting extra foam rolling, right, or taking a lax ball to their shoulder and rolling out the shoulder, or, you know, maybe some guys listen to a podcast, or, you know, there was 1 or 2 guys who like meditated with our mental strength coaches or mental skills coaches, and that was for you, like 30 minutes you needed to get your mind right, to get your body right. And then that progressing from there, we would jump into what we called like a movement prep. And all that is trying to steal reps to kind of go and influence your delivery without needing a ball in your hand, right? So that work happened out on the turf or in the weight room. And all we would do is kind of pair up movements that you could do in a weight room, whether it be with a band or a PVC pipe or lightweight, that might go and help facilitate your lead leg action, or maybe your arm action, or maybe your drive leg, right? Like perhaps maybe even the way you separated, okay? So we're looking for ways for guys to create an adaptation in their delivery without perhaps being on a mound doing dry work and things like that. So from there, they would go into some dynamic warm-up. And then some guys would jump into wrist weights. Some guys would jump into plyo ball throws. And like, I'm a firm believer in plyo throws, right? I think it inspires adaptation. I think it creates enough of a stimulus to where like you got to pay attention to each throw, each rep, and really be mindful of it, especially if you give a guy some awareness for what it's used for, right? Like some guys go and do plyo throws like just because Driveline says, right? And like, fine, yeah, Kyle, they're all good people, they're good dudes. But like never do something because a coach just says to do it, right? Like know the why behind it. That way you could buy into it and maybe get a little bit better from it. And from there, after plyo throws, guys would get into their throwing program. And right now, like, it's kind of new. We were doing it a little bit at Elon, but like the whole theory of motor learning and training ugly, right? Like being okay with failure and challenging yourself in your throwing program. That's kind of like the new thing. It's hot right now, right? To go and inspire, you know, self-organization of the body and the delivery. You might go and do one QB drop back throw, and you might do one backhand. You might throw with a 6, a 5, a 4-ounce ball. And all that stuff is really just to inspire guys to figure it out themselves, right? Like without me going and saying like, Sal, your arm's not getting up, or man, your lead leg block is really poor. it's like, hey, be an athlete, man, like figure it out. Which is really cool. I think it gives guys freedom to kind of go and build their own routine within a throwing program. But I kind of lie on the fence where like there has to be some substantial technique work with guys, right? You can't just let a guy who has no idea what it looks like figure it out himself, right? Like, you know, maybe your first rounder can go and do that, right? But the guy who, you know, the 17-year-old Dominican who doesn't know what a good delivery feels like and looks like, you know, a lot could go wrong when they're self-organizing. So to be able to go and help facilitate what a delivery looks like actual technique work and explaining to him through drills and things like that, what a good delivery looks and feels like, is really, really important as well. And I think it would be that way for high school guys.
Yeah, and piggybacking off of that, like something that kind of goes overlooked with a lot of high school guys and a lot of guys at the younger level, is simply getting your body temperature up, like before you're about to do an activity. Like I've seen it so many times with these young guys. Like if it's guys we train, if it's guys from the team, you know, whatever, they simply go to the weight room and, you know, the first thing they're doing, they're under the squat bar or they're throwing plyo balls off the wall. Like getting your body temperature warmed up to a temperature that is going to ultimately make you be the most effective during your training is something that's super important, especially with warming the tissues up. And, you know, as these kids keep getting older and older, it's going to get more important and more important because everything they do, their brain, you know, is taking a mental note of that. And that ultimately is building, you know, who they're going to be on the mound, you know, at a shortstop, in center field, wherever they are, with pitching, with life in general. And something that like I really emphasis in like the weight room and pitching is that, you know, a lot of these motor control patterns and stuff like that are carried over. Like I'm someone who firmly believes that the weight room transfers over to the field in significantly in movement patterns and stuff like that. Like I could see if the guy, you know, he's coming out of his back hip, if he's riding it down the mound well and stuff like that, a lot of the time just by how they do a deadlift and simply if they're cueing the right things, same with squat. And then, you know, ultimately when they get on the mound, are they staying in that back hip? Are they getting stuck? You know, are things, you know, happening? So with that 30-minute prep, like for me personally, you know, I use that time to pretty much work from the ground up. So I'll start with my ankles, work all the way up through my body to, you know, ultimately mobilize it all to get ready to do some high intensity work for the day. If it's a recovery day, if it's, you know, a pull down, long toss mound day, it doesn't matter. I'm ultimately going through that same routine every day because I'm a reliever. So, you know, ultimately the goal is to get to the big leagues and be able to go out there 3-4 days in a row if need be. But I think that's something that, you know, in the youth programming and stuff like that, it's significantly overlooked. And, you know, just by doing a couple arm swings and stuff like that, you're not, you know, truly getting the full effect of, you know, what you could ultimately.
Yeah. And Sal hit the nail on the head, right? Like sometimes it's funny because he brought up some things. He's a little bit closer to like having been in all these high school guys' shoes. But like sometimes I forget like what I looked for when I recruited. And he hit the nail on the head. Like I oftentimes knew whether a pitcher was locked in or not, especially on the recruiting trail. Not so much in summer because like summer guys are typically on their game, like warming up and stuff. If at the very least it's just to show the college coaches they care and shit. Like you see it all the time. But like if you go watch a random high school game in late April or like right now, watch the team stretch. Like it'll tell you whether they're gonna, you know, win by 10, lose by 10, or you know, they've got talent or don't, they've got direction or not, by the way they warm up. And he hit the nail on the head. Like guys need to be prepared to throw before they throw. And beyond that, like our whole idea behind movement prep in the weight room is exactly what Sal touched on is the fact that like adaptation can happen everywhere and anywhere, right? I had a guy who landed on his toe really hard. It was crazy, and it was like a switch came off in his head, and I tried to for about 16 months, right? Like cue this thing, like, dude, stop landing on your toe. We did a lot of like heel to toe drills, like rockers where he'd rock from his heel to his toe, try to like get him landing full footed, all this crap, right? And one day he comes up in practice, and this is when I was at Iona. This is about 6-7 years ago now. He came up to me and he said, "Hey, I think I know what you mean, like landing on my toe." I said, "What was the switch? Like, what happened? I've been trying to do this for 2 years." And he said, "I was walking down a hill and I tried walking on my toes." And he said, "I felt like I was going to fall the entire time." And like, so like adaptation happens everywhere, right? Like this kid was walking down a hill. I'd been trying to change this in his delivery for 16 months, like from a spring all the way to the next spring, and I couldn't do it. And the kid walked down the hill one day and figured it out. Like the stuff you do in the weight room directly correlates to things you do on the field and on the mound, right? Like you could tell a guy has a good hip hinge, right, by the way he squats, similar to what Sal said. You could tell a guy who's going to be able to accept force on his lead leg and block really well by the way he moves a trap bar, deadlift, right? Or perhaps maybe the way he does like a walking lunge. Like all of this stuff is directly transferable to what we're doing on the mound, right? And like I'm a huge believer, and it's part of the reason I chose to go to the Mariners. In like everything we do needs to facilitate what comes out of the hand, right? Like if it doesn't tangibly impact velocity, maybe spin direction or ride or run or sink, something like that. If it's not going to make something better, why are we doing it? So, everything really has to be mindful when we're coaching. And the hopes is if you're being really mindful as a coach, the guys, that are training are equally as mindful, right? And like the one thing I think is really cool, like our director of player development is an absolute stud. And he's really good with the mental side of the game. And, he's all about the process, right? Like keeping everything in perspective, right? Like training for the end goal as opposed to like training for right now and expecting results right now. And beyond that, like if you look at that, right, let's say there's 3 athletes, right? The athlete who goes to practice when the coaches call it, right? And they work really hard at practice. And then you don't see them do anything else, right? The guy who, number 2, goes to every practice and also puts in like an extra 2 days of work because he's really dedicated, right? It's all about quantity. Like if I work harder, I work more, I'm going to be better, right? And then guy number 3, perhaps he goes to every practice and he only puts 1 extra day of work in, but every single rep, he's really mindful, right? And like really has a purpose with every rep. I'd bet my money that the 3rd guy'd be the best guy, right? Like the guy who could really apply his mind and his focus to every rep always turns out the best. And I was really fortunate, man. Like at Elon, I had a broad range of guys. I was lucky enough. We had 4 arms go in the top 8 rounds over 2 years. And they were all extremely different, right? And the first rounder didn't do a ton extra, but everything he did, he was extremely mindful, like really locked into what he did whenever he did something. 2 of the 8th rounders would like try to run through a brick wall for you, like worked extremely hard. And then the 3rd guy, or the 3rd 8th rounder kind of just showed up to practice every day, right? Like, and he worked a little hard, like here and there. He probably could have been more than an 8th rounder, right? But like the guy who turned out to be the first rounder was the guy who didn't do a ton extra, like didn't really care to think about baseball off the field. But man, like he would do his work in such a professional way and such a mindful way. There wasn't a single rep in the weight room or in the throwing program where like he wasn't extremely locked in, which is like really, really cool. It's really rare. And that's what makes him special, right? Is like he's really mindful every single day that he has to do something. And so like he didn't work extra hard. He just worked really diligently when he did work, right? Like he purposefully worked. So it's just interesting to see different perspectives, right? Like the guy who works extra and works really hard, he's gonna get better than the guy who just simply does nothing. But the guy who puts his mind and his focus in the right place every single rep always winds up being the best. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's such a little thing, so important. Our pitching coordinator has like a brilliant saying, right? Like there's 24 hours in the day, and we might have our throwing program. Guys might throw for 15 minutes, right? 15 minutes of your day is 1% of your day, right? So if you could be so locked in, so mindful for 15 minutes for 1% of your day, if you did that every day for a week, think about how much better you would be. If you did it every day for 2 weeks or a month, think about how much better you got than the next guy, how much better your throwing program was, right? And if you put it in perspective, 1% of your day is nothing, right? It's like literally nothing that we're asking you to be locked in. You know, especially, you know, like Sal, you know, that's his job. That's what he's trying to do. You know, but it goes for these high school guys that are, you know, trying to make it in college baseball or get drafted out of high school or, you know, just be the best ball player they could be, right? The best version of themselves. It's 1% of your day to go and throw and, you know, not talk for 12 of the 15 minutes about, you know, Johnny kissed Sally and Sally chugged a beer and Joey did you know, hit the nastiest pong shot ever. You know, like you could just lock in for 1% of your day. You're going to be a ton better. That's all.
Well, great stuff. I think, you know, you got us started, and I think, what do you guys kind of do after, you know, where's your focus after you're done throwing? Is it running? Is it, you know, mobility type stuff? Like, where's your guy? What do you have your guys focus on, you know, after they're done throwing, I think?
Sal, you want to hit on that first?
Yeah, I mean, like me personally, I think every guy should pretty much focus on, you know, what they need work on. And, you know, after your throwing program, I think that's more of an, you know, like me personally, I like to go into each day with kind of, you know, one goal, and I'll try and work on that one thing, you know, until I feel like I did it enough where, you know, I feel comfortable in doing that without having to, you know, have an internal or an external cue for it. So like right now I'm trying to, you know, shorten up my arm a little bit, and Petrosky, you were over the house this weekend and I was using that tap bell club, and so like the last 2 days, that's something that I, you know, really emphasized in my throwing program and in my development. I think some guys, you know, could get a little over analytic with things and, you know, overemphasize things. Like my brother, he videos like a lot, but at the end of the day, you know, he has that one thing that he's working on and that, you know, he's trying to improve, that he could develop confidence in. And I think a lot of the prep work and stuff like that, you know, anything that you want to address, because throwing is ultimately the most important part of your day as a pitcher. So I think after your throwing is where you really need to, you know, you need to sit down, you need to look in the mirror, and you got to say, all right, I did this well today, I did that well today, and I could work on this. And then making a plan going forward, you know, if it's for the next week, if it's for the next month, on how we're going to get better at addressing that certain plan, I think that could go a long way, you know, especially with throwing program. One of those clean fuego balls that, you know, you work on ride and stuff like that to different organizations is because I have good ride from, you know, a low release height. But I think just working on that daily and improving that, you know, I mean, personally, I'll do about 15 throws with it, you know, from like 30 to 45 feet just before I start my throwing program every day. And ultimately that gives me the feel and, you know, the confidence that I need to have to, when I get up to a high intensity and when I'm on the mound to, you know, execute the best pitch that I could possibly throw. And I just think that's super important, you know, not overloading with too many things to work on, but, you know, really concentrating on one specific thing and then going from there and, you know, complementing that with, you know, your weight room, your mobility and your conditioning and stuff like that.
For sure. And like the only suggestion I have for high school guys or maybe college guys is simply, right, like understand how the body works. Like, and what I mean by that is like understand what you need to do to, one, get the most out of your day, and then two, recover for the next time you're going to train, right? So like a lot of guys, and it's not ideal at all. A lot of guys will like throw heavy on Monday and then lift on Tuesday, and then throw again Wednesday and run Wednesday and lift Thursday, right? Like what time did you give your body to recover? And that's like huge, especially like, and not that you guys can control it, but like in the travel ball scene, you're playing Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's like, yeah, you're going to be, you know, pitching on Friday and then maybe an inning on Sunday. But then you see these guys like out long tossing on Saturday, and it's like, good Lord, you just threw more than Sal does in pro ball, right? Like, understanding that is really important for kids. Like, I feel like nowadays, and especially when summertime comes, they want to put their entire workload in that weekend series, and it's like, oh, that was a bear. We played 4 pool games and we made it to semifinals at Diamond Nation. Now I got to go to the beach. I got to take 3 days off, right? Like that's not good either. And like you have to find some type of balance, right? Where like I call it a work-life balance for me, right? Like just trying not to get divorced. But for like high school players, right? It's like, man, your work isn't just Friday to Sunday when there's tournament games, right? Like you shouldn't be working all 3 days of that tournament. You should work on your throw day, right? Like do some recovery the next day and then take a day off and then like work during the week so you're ready for the next Friday. And I think a lot of guys miss the boat on that. And I think it's really evident. Like you'll see guys, I'm trying to think about like the typical recruiting cycle for me. Like you see guys in, you know, first, second week, you know, battle at the border, let's say, right? Like you see guys coming out hot, right? They're freaking 85, 87, hammer. You see them the next week. It's like, all right, they're down a little bit, 82, 85. The curveball's a little, you know, a little bit weaker, a little bit looser. And then they're awful the next week, right? And you're like, wait, this isn't the guy I saw 2 weeks ago. And then all of a sudden they like go and reset because they were really bad. And then maybe around Georgia, they come out and they're like 88, 90. And you're like, what the fuck just happened, right? Like, you know, this guy just went through a whirlwind of like crap. And, you know, I don't know which guy's the real guy, right? Like the ability to kind of show some consistency from outing to outing in the summer is a direct reflection on your preparation to me, right? Like the guys I always wound up recruiting were the guys that were like always pretty good, right? Like I never got I shouldn't say that. We've had some high school guys taking the draft and stuff. But like I never really got the All-American, right? I never got a PG All-American, never committed one. So like I always looked for the guys that were really consistent, more than anything. Obviously there's guys that do special things and all that type of stuff, but like the guy who was always the same guy every time out, like with a little fluctuation, that guy in my head, maybe he was just really good at doing that sort of thing and like turning the light on. But for me, that had gave me some type of idea about what they were doing on Monday through Thursday before, Domination Super 16, right? Like it gave me some idea that they were doing what they had to do to be ready. And that to me is really important.
So I got another kind of question, and I've seen so many guys kind of velocity and plyo care balls where they're good one day, they're bad the next day. And there's just this tweet, and I'm kind of curious to know if you kind of ever heard this, but it says learning how to build momentum in a throw can be highly beneficial. It says, was grinding out plyo velo days, trying to force arm speed rather than build linear momentum into the block and let the sequence do the rest. So does any of that make sense to you about, kind of building linear momentum more than building arm speed? Is that something that, is something that you've kind of heard or makes sense, kind of can redirect into that?
It's kind of funny you're saying that, right? And like I have a bias for this. But right now we're going through biomechanical analysis as a pitching group with the Mariners. We have markerless pitching lab, right, in game at T-Mobile Park. And the idea is that like long term, let's say Sal had been doing something really interesting. Maybe instead of 19 inches of ride, the last 3 outings he's had 24. Well, let's give him 2 days at the facility and bring him up to T-Mobile for semi, right? Like to figure out what exactly is going on kinematically, right? Like within the sequence that might be facilitating more ride. And let's bring him up a month, after that and see if it's the same. And we've been talking about that, and my bias is that like I am all about creating momentum, right? So like the idea here, and I just put out like a huge, basically like my own study on momentum in the delivery. Like the idea of the delivery to me is like to not fuck anything up for when the foot strikes, right? And beyond that, right, like all the magic to me happens, like all the output stuff happens after your foot's hit the ground. But that being said, you could really screw up what comes out of the hand prior to lead leg foot strike. So like the idea for me is like, well, what creates an efficient delivery? And for me, that's creating momentum. And that's creating momentum on up the chain from the time, it might start, for most guys, it starts with a rear hip, like a post leg internal rotation. And then the next part is when your foot strikes, okay, how do we accept that force? And how do we block, right, that force? Are we stable? And we could then shoot up momentum and energy up the chain. And then all the way through everything else in your delivery, right? But like we're throwing on a slope, okay? We're working down a slope, right? So we have like physics on our side, right? Gravity is going to bring our body down, but we need to be able to move the center of mass well, right? In order to go and efficiently do all of that, right? Like the one big thing I've always seen with the guy, like I'm thinking of like the slow movers, like the guys who work at like an awful pace, not between pitches, but in his delivery, right? Like in his windup. That guy to me, like always struggled to repeat. And then the results were lacking consistency, right? And I say repeat, but that's like not a real thing. But like all that means is like I would put the guy on the clock, say like, all right, you know, from the time you took your rocker step to the time I hit the glove, you were a 2.9. Let's try to be a 2.3. And then all of a sudden they created more momentum, right? They got moving a little bit faster, which created a little bit more efficiencies, right? Because they had less time to fuck it up, right? And all of a sudden, you know, maybe they were 80, 84 beforehand. Now they're 84, 86. Or maybe they were 90, 93, but with 50% strikes. And now they're 90, 93 with 66% strikes, right? Like, I think of it as like walking a tightrope, right? If you were walking, let's say, from one light pole to the next on a tightrope, right? The majority of guys would try to like walk really slow. And if there's nothing like balancing you like a big long bar or pole, you would fall, right? Like you have a better shot of going quick, right? And trying to figure that thing out as you go, than like really trying to like walk without a bar across a tightrope. And so I think when thinking about the delivery in that sense, you know, if we can move fast and move efficient, you know, it'll create more efficiencies. And that's, you know, again, like momentum's huge for me. Like I was never good at coaching a hip hinge. I felt like I got guys way too deep into like near the end range of their mobilities, and thus they couldn't fire out of it. They got stuck. I think you guys have seen that, right? Like I've screwed up a guy or two trying to coach a hip hinge. And then all of a sudden all their weight was going downward instead of projected outward, right? So like every guy I've ever coached, right? Like I'm not a cookie cutter, but like no one's ever gotten into the serious hip hinge, right? They've always had like a really good forward move where, you know, by the time their leg reached the top of its leg lift, they were already descending down the mound. And then like the rest of it kind of lined itself up, to be honest. Like not much more than that.
Sean, you touched on it a little bit before with guys needing to have a plan in between appearances and working throughout the week. What I've seen a lot, especially in summer balls, guys do have a plan before they throw. They know, I mean, I had a kid this past summer that needed to warm up with a body blade an hour before the start and then go through his plow balls and all that. But then in between starts or the very next day, I ask him, well, what'd you do today? I was, I rested. I didn't do anything. All right, what are you doing tomorrow? Oh, I might throw a little bit.
Yeah.
There was never really much need for conditioning in these guys' minds. And then, like you said, as you get through the summer, you start to fade off. And then as you get in July and August and the heat's cranking up and you're playing on these turf fields and guys are drained with no prep in between, can you kind of talk about what guys should be doing in between in terms of conditioning or recovery, specifically get their body recovered and ready to go for their next appearance?
Yeah. So actually, right now during this quarantine, I've been, you know, apart from a couple of the Mariners guys that are down here in Carolinas, I've been keeping my mind on baseball with two high school guys. And they're two fairly talented guys. One's a 23 lefty who he's like 84, 86. Every school in the country's on him and offered him. The other one's a 2022 righty who kind of he's got a huge arm, but he's coming into his own, right? And one of the things they've struggled with is like between seeing me, like what are they doing, right? So I'll just take you through like the same thing I took them through is like, what did it look like for my Friday night starter, right? Like, so in college, right? So, and I would assume travel ball's a lot the same way, like you're making one start a week, right? Like, let's just call that day Friday, right? So Friday they would go, they'd pitch. If it were, typically it was a night game, so they didn't lift that night. They would lift the next morning, with some type of, and this was like a big, heavy lift. And those guys would go and they would lift real heavy and throwing would be optional. Like that's probably the only day your guy got right is like that day, right? Like I'm just resting. They're like, fine, cool. But did you get like a huge lift in a small window, right? Like we always talk about trying to be within 18 hours, right? So if my guy started at 7 o'clock at night, he threw his last pitch at 8:45. Well, we couldn't lift, at 4 o'clock the next day. It just, to me, it didn't make any sense. He'd be lifting at 10 a.m., let's say, just to keep that window tight, right? To keep the stresses together. And then the rest of the day, man, he chilled, he hung out and, threw in a dip and hung out with me, whatever, right? Like whatever the hell he wanted to do, he did. And then the next day would be, depending on the guy, would be like a moderate toss, like 120, 150 for some guys. And for some guys who are a little bit more into throwing, it would be like a long toss day. Like day 2 would be a long toss day for some guys. And both ended up with some type of sprint work. And now the one thing I should preface this with is like, we bucketed our throwers at Elon in 2 categories, right? Like, and for lack of better terms, we call them speed throwers or power throwers, right? Not to say one through 90 and the other through 98, right? Let's say they both through 92. Speed throwers, generally those are your loose, whippy, fast arm guys. Those guys, right, you want to create low volume, high intent, right? So they would go, that would be my guy who, man, let's say he went to 150, right? Because we're trying to cut down the throws. But man, every throw was 80%, right? And my power throwers, my strength-based throwers, that day too, for those guys would be, okay, higher volume, lower intent. So they would go with a more drastic, longer, meaning lengthwise and total throws, a longer throw session, right, with less intent, right? So they might stick at 60% and try to get a bigger volume in, right? And so that's where it's a little bit different for every guy. So that was Sunday, right? So they would do, again, if you were a strength guy, you would do a long toss. If you were a speed guy, you would go to 120 and really rip them, at 80% or sub-max effort. Monday would be off, right, because it was an off day as a program. And, our Friday guy would take Monday off. Tuesday would be a bullpen day. And then proceeding the bullpen would be some light, or, by light, I mean light amount of reps, maybe 10, 30-yard sprints and a lift. Okay. Wednesday would be another kind of speed or strength-based throwing day. And then Thursday was optional, right? Like Thursday would be, some guys would get into the weight room and do what we would call, I forget what we freaking called it, but more of like a mobility movement prep type work. Maybe some light hinge stuff to help them with their lower half, really trying to facilitate proper movement. And some guys that day would go and throw a light flat ground. Some guys wouldn't throw hardly any. They'd throw to 60 feet and shut it down to be ready for Friday. But like the big part in understanding all of this is understanding the arm you're working with. The guy who's strength base is going to need a lot more throws and a lot less intensity, right? The speed based throwers are going to need a ton of stress on the arm, right? Like stress just meaning high intent, but not as many throws. And I would say for a high school guy, if they could lift 2 to 3 times a week and throw 4 to 5 times a week, including that day they're pitching, that's pretty adequate. That's pretty sufficient.
Sean, so that guy started off, the guy he's talking about, started off 84, 85 first weekend in June. And by the time we hit mid to late summer, he was like 80 to 81.
Yeah, it's managing workload. And again, it's about what you do, when the lights aren't on, right? Like The guy who kind of fluctuates big like that, you could almost guarantee it's something he's eating, or, you know, not hydrating enough, or perhaps it's, you know, man, he doesn't do anything during the week. Or maybe, man, he's not sleeping enough, right? Like, that sounds funny, right? But like nowadays with Fortnite and Call of Duty and all this stuff, like, kids are, you know, they're getting shitty sleep, right? And the sleep patterns are really, really drastic, right? Some days it might be fall asleep at 2 a.m. and wake up at noon in the summer. Some days it might be, okay, you know, 3 a.m. and I got to be at 8 to get to Diamond Nation. You know, like, these kids kill themselves by lacking sleep and not hydrating. We actually monitored hydration levels at Elon, and those guys were really diligent about it, and they were really honest, because they knew if they were dehydrated, we would, you know, let them carry a water bottle around practice and, you know, do some of those things. That way they could get hydrated. But you know, it's a huge piece of the puzzle, right? Like, recovering and doing all that sort of thing all plays into, you know, how you're going to look on Friday night.
I got another question, and it's kind of one of those things. What are you guys doing or trying to make them understand about holding runners? Are you kind of put them in a preset from, you know, the stretch position, or you kind of teaching a slide step? Like, what are you doing, I guess, to, you know, implement holding runners more importantly? Like, I guess at your level, it's really focused on, or it's really understood, I guess, you know, at that game. But at high school kids, they're very bad at holding runners, I feel like.
Yeah, they are. They are really bad. And because it's more transferable to what you guys are doing, now I'll talk about what we did in college. In college, it's crazy. It's almost like Fight Club. Like, you didn't talk about it all that much, and thus they didn't stress and freak out about it. Like, we never talked about walks either, right? And we just happened to never walk guys, because we never talked about it. We even, our first rounder, we used to celebrate walks. Like, the dugout used to go crazy because he only walked 6 guys in 100 innings. You know, but like, the holding the runners thing, to me, is all about the ability to get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Like, what's the easiest way, right? And you could answer this, like, what's the easiest way to get a guy not to run the second base when they're on first? Like, think logically. Like, really simple. Just
Not
hold
let
the
'em get
ball,
on first.
right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, well, don't let him go on first, yeah. Right? But let's say the guy got on first, right? Like, just hold the baseball, right? Like, he's not going to run the second base if you're holding on to the baseball. So getting really comfortable in those environments where you got to hold on to the baseball is really, really important for me. And so we did a lot of work. Like, we stole this. A buddy of mine, he lives right in town, right in Burlington where I live, but he's the AA pitching coach for the Nationals. And, you know, Max Scherzer famously, between pitches in the bullpen, holds the ball for like 15, 20, 25 seconds at times, right? And it's something we started doing, like getting guys comfortable holding the baseball and just standing there. Because it's really uncomfortable. And more than that, like we used to drill, like where I'd say, like, all right, hold for 7 seconds. And they would go and I'd have a stopwatch. Hey, what do you think you held for 7 seconds? And they say, yeah, definitely 3.5, right? Like I'd go, okay, hold for 10 seconds. He would think he held for 10 seconds, right? 6.5. And you're saying, you know, the kid's like, well, what's going on? Like, I'm counting to 10 or I'm counting to 7, right? But like, they're so uncomfortable standing there in a set position holding the baseball that they count quicker, right? Like, so we used to, essentially, all we used to do at Elon, and really no one ran, was hold the base, right? Like, and we got really comfortable holding on to that darn thing.
Would you script holds into a bullpen?
Yeah, oh yeah, and like randomly too. so I would script some like, all right, hey, you know, we're going to go with a 3-second hold, a 5-second hold, a 10-second hold. And we're just going to alternate them maybe, right? Or some days I'd go like more game, like, all right, we're going to go 1-second hold, 3-second hold, 5-second hold. And then some days I would randomly say like, all right, next, like if a guy was grooving, it was my favorite time to do it. Like guy couldn't miss a spot, all this stuff. All right, stretch. We're holding for 12 seconds. And the guy'd be like, what the fuck, man? I was dotting up. And I'm like, yeah, that's perfect, man. Like, let's say you went 2 1/3 dotting up, like couldn't miss. And then all of a sudden guy got a seeing eye single, right? You're just going to be off your game now? No, like let's get going. Right. So that'd be the perfect time. Like, all right, hey, here's a 12-second hold. Like figure it out. And like let the dude hold the ball and see where he's at mentally. Right. Like the guys who speed it up, right. And you tell them to hold for 12 seconds, they hold for 7. Those guys are really uncomfortable. Right. Those are the guys that right. If you have enough good guys, right. In college, you don't pitch that guy. Right. Because the game speeds up on him. But 2, it's just an awareness factor, right? For you guys, you got to throw everybody or mom and dad's going to be really pissed. But like, hey, Johnny, man, like the reason you gave up 4 bags today is because you hold for 2 seconds, you pitch every time. You know what I mean? Like figure it out, hold for 5 seconds, hold for 7 seconds, hold and step off, hold and pick. Like get really comfortable doing the uncomfortable stuff. Because you'll see it all across baseball. If I did that in Modesto this summer or this spring, same thing would have happened, right? Like for every guy that was really awesome at slowing the game down, there'd be guys that went and they sped up the whole process because they don't like doing it. And that's like, for me, that's the biggest thing. If you could hold on to the baseball and not have the same set time every time, you're going to be just fine. Right. And then like, if you could incorporate pick work and all that, like fine, do it. And all I do is to teach like a quick feet and a quick arm, right? Like shorten your arm swing, have really quick feet. Don't do any of the high school, like step off behind the mound, turn real slow and then throw it over 100 miles an hour. That don't work. Just
something we did with our guys last year, Sean, we would just take, if we're on dirt, we just draw it in the dirt, but inside we'd take tape and just draw 4 small squares in the front of the rubber. Yep. And that way guys would be able to see how big their step was or their pivot was.
Yeah, perfect.
You're in box 1. When we pivot and go, we want you to stay in box 1.
Perfect.
You're coming all the way over here, box 4, box 3. We need you to be quick, be tight. And it was kind of a little bit of visual representation these guys could see.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I might steal that one.
Feel free.
Honestly, because I don't really have a recipe for that, like beyond just holding the baseball, right? And getting guys comfortable doing that. And that started at Elon. I wouldn't do it in pro ball, right? But that started at Elon in our throwing program. Like we started off every day with what we called, and again, it was 2 buckets of guys that were working on pitch shaping, similar to what Sal mentioned. So we'd have our pitch shaping guys and then our pitching guys, right? Like we would just call them live group and pitch shaping group. And my live group would start every day with what we call the target series, where these were at really short distances, right? 30, 45 feet, where guys, man, have an issue throwing less than 60 feet. I put them, in different situations where, they'd have to catch the ball from their partner, hold before they made their throw, or at 50 feet make them go and essentially pitch out of the stretch and really hold on to the baseball. And that to me got guys comfortable throwing from 52 feet, 36 feet, 44 feet, and it got guys comfortable holding the baseball. Just more added reps.
Well,
oh, go ahead.
Well, just what I've had to do with some of our guys, because like you said, they like to go quick, is we'll legit have the catcher put down a number of how many seconds they have to hold and have them leave their hand there before they give the pitch signal. Yep. Just so they're sitting there and they're waiting and waiting and waiting. Because otherwise, the high school guys do get in that quick routine, and it's very, very easy to run. It's very easy for the hitters to kind of pick up pitches. because everything is the same speed and everything is the same sequence. So just trying to slow them down. We'll try to do different, changes. Sometimes quick, sometimes slow, sometimes medium. So just kind of flipping it. Brian, what you
I love that you say that, right? Because the one thing we used to say at Elon, right, like we were all about strikeouts. If you followed our strikeout numbers, were really, really good at Elon. And all I used to tell them to try to get them to advocate for picking off more was that it screwed up the hitter, right? Like the more time he had to sit and wait for the next pitch was more time for him to fall out of rhythm with you. So you said it like it hits the nail on the head, right? Like the guys hate picking off. Like it's not fun. They'd rather throw a pitch. There's more of a result and there's more hanging on the pitch than the pick. But if you tell him, man, you go pick twice this at bat, this guy's got less of a shot at the plate, guys all of a sudden were picking. And I was like, wait, what's going on? I had to, and they're like, yeah, well, the hitter, and they remembered, like, yeah, we're screwing up the hitter. And I was like, yeah, you guys are smart.
And sometimes what we would do too, so if we were going to do a pick, everybody usually does one or two. So I would have guys throw over 3 times, because after you throw over the second time, they're like, you're not gonna throw over the third time. So they usually get that little extra step.
Yeah.
And able to run that pick.
No doubt.
Brian, did you have something before I cut you off?
No, I was trying to think. I read somewhere, I can't remember who it was. It sounds like something Zach Greinke would do. But Sean, like you said, if a guy gets a good swing on the ball, pick over 2-3 times. Where I saw a video of somebody just cranked one about 420 but foul, and about 3-4 pickoffs before he threw another pitch.
Yeah.
And they likened it to golf. If I take a great tee shot and then my partner's buffing it down the fairway, it's now been 5-10 minutes since I put a good swing on the ball. I'm not going to have a great swing this next time.
That's right. And even if it had no impact, right, you feel like you're not going to have a good swing. I mean, like that's way more important.
If you hold for 3 seconds and throw over 3 times, I mean, you got them 30 seconds before you even deliver another pitch to a guy, bare minimum.
Yeah, no doubt.
I guess one more question is holding runners on second base now that sign stealing is so, I guess out there right now. What did you guys as an organization or try to implement or anything to help young guys to try to, I guess not allow that, or new systems that you put in place for sign stealing or anything like that?
I could talk about Elon. I don't know. You guys have buddies all over the college game, might screw them over. But essentially, right, so in college baseball, right, there's a program called Synergy where you could go back and watch every pitch of every game, right? And you could literally click, all right, show me Johnny fastball throwing, with a guy on second base. And we used to sit there as a program after I'd write my scouting report on hitters and, the hitting coach did it about the opposing pitcher. We literally used to sit there and try to pick sequences. That way we knew whether they used follow the 2 or taps or this or that, right? Because the camera was out in center field. So you'd be able to see the pitch sequences from basically everybody. And some programs, right, it'd be really easy and you'd wonder why our anemic offense scored 14 runs. Well, we got on second base and we didn't leave second base, right? There'd be a freaking pass ball and we'd stand on second base. Honestly. But so what we started doing was different infielders were calling the hot pitch, the hot sign, which is kind of funny, right? So like, in college baseball, it's really, really popular to go and with a guy on second base, look at the shortstop or look at second baseman for the, like what pick, like pick signs and all that crap, right? But depending on the guy, right, it might be his feet are hot. So if his feet were, let's say we're going to the shortstop for our pick signs, right? They were all decoy. His feet were together, it was first sign, right? And the catcher would be looking too, obviously. If his feet were like in line, it was first sign. If his left foot was forward, it'd be second sign. If his right foot was forward, it'd be third sign, right? So like everyone, and then we'd throw like a bunch of numbers down, right? And no one knew our sequence ever because the shortstop was telling us what the hot sign was. And then more than that, right? Like if we thought somebody would be onto our feet, like we'd go, okay, the shortstop's third touch, right? So this be first sign, second sign, third sign, and we'd go third touch, right? And then we'd go, okay, next thing it'd be first touch. It'll be, and no one ever had a clue. So like our position players always called it, right? That way the cameras couldn't, you know, they couldn't do what we were doing to them. We would literally sit there and I'd say 60% of opponents last year gave us their signs. And those were the weekends we hit well, if we got to second base.
Would you change it depending on your pitcher? I mean, when I was at JUCO, we had some dummies. We couldn't really do anything too complicated, but if we have some of our smarter guys, we might use out as the indicator. So if we got one out, it's whatever's following one. 2 outs is whatever's following 2. Other guys, we would just kind of have to say it from the catcher, hey 2 or hey 1, and whatever he's yelling is the indicator because our guys can't think on the mound.
Yeah,
would you
didn't change it.
pitcher to pitcher?
No, if you couldn't figure it out, you didn't pitch. But like we had the ability to do that, right? Like if you couldn't figure that out, you didn't pitch. And you know, more than that, it was such an easy, you know, system. The other one I know we were using was like the back of a hitter's jersey number. So like number 1 would be first sign, number 2 second sign, number 3 third sign, number 4 would be first sign, all the way up to 9. And then if it was a double digit, if it was in the 10s, it would be first sign, 20s second sign, 30s third sign. If there was a number 45, it would be back to first sign. And no one ever picked that one up either. So like those would be the 2 things we use. Like we did have a dumb pitcher who like couldn't figure it out from the shortstop, who we needed to pitch because it was really good. And he just used the back of a hitter's jersey.
I think another good one for that is you could just do like a head behind even. So first sign, second sign, third sign. If you're ahead in the count, it's the first time. If you're behind in the count, it's the second sign. And if you're even, it's the third sign. So
Yeah.
0-0 would be an even count. You go first sign or you go third sign. You know, if you're 0-1, it's the first sign. If you're 1-1, it's the third sign. And then if you're 1-0, you know, it'd be the second sign.
Yeah, that's really good, especially with no video. Like that in travel ball, that would work perfect. The issue is like that is a known sign sequence, right? Like, so we were going through every one of them at Elon, and I should say like we had an analytics department, like all young kids, all now who have the seniors moved on. They have like really cool jobs in baseball, and they actually coded it out where like we would put down like I would type into Excel the sequence, they would put it into their R program, and it would spit out exactly what they were doing, which is really like it's gotten that crazy in college now. Like we knew every pitch the guy was throwing. Again, 60% of the opponents. So.
Anybody have anything else? All right, man. Thanks. I really appreciate you coming on, man. You know,
No, it's been fun. I miss you guys.
I know, man. It's been the last time I saw you. Oh shit, I don't even know when. It was either at PBR or maybe down
Florida
in
or something.
Florida or something. Yeah. It's been
a while.
Yeah. So
how are we doing? How's the Pride doing? What are we up to these days? I see on Twitter you're expanding and doing all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, just adding players, you know, adding good players. You know, so right now we go from, you know, Albany, you know, out into Westchester, you know, moving more now into PA. Even though I'm from PA, we never had a lot of PA guys, but Mike's bought a bunch of the PA guys who are on right now. You know, over you know, last year we qualified for Jupiter and went to Jupiter and won our pool. You know, so we got some. We're moving up since Wall and Paul Pack Gym all those years ago.
No doubt.
No
doubt. And what's the summer looking like for you guys? I've heard rumors, and again, like my best friend in baseball, Corey Mascara, told me that
Yeah.
dead period might run all the way through to summer now.
Really?
Yeah, like what's going on?
I have
Any
no
any
clue.
idea?